Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jock here from Deadly Departed. Welcome to another episode. If you're joining us because you're a regular listener or viewer, then thank you. And if you've not, then consider joining us, because today we've got another guest. Because as I said to you guys before, I was getting a little bit worried the fact that I was the only person on here talking to you guys. So I decided to bring some excellent people in. And as you know, I'm very choosy about who I interview in the realms of parapsychology, paranormal, afterlife, and all that good stuff. So today, my guest, as I hope to God Almighty I say this name right, is Dr Eliot Van Dusen, is it Dusen or Dusen?
No, you were right, Van Dusen.
Van Dusen is my guest, and he'll say hello in a minute. I brought Elliot in because Elliot is a parapsychologist. He is he was a criminal investigator. He served in law enforcement. He's got excellent stories. And the thing that I like about the way he comes across is how scientific he is in his understanding, his investigations. And he's written 2 books, which we're going to talk about as well. And he's got lots of things going on, and we've got another announcement at the end of it. You'll hear more from Elliot in the future. So, Elliot Van Dusen, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing great, and just want to thank you for having me on the show.
I'm looking forward to it because I don't often get that. Oh, who's that? Is that a ghost in the background? Is it got your daughter's in the background? Bring her on. Let's chat. Okay, so we don't often get paranormal invest. I mean, I know a couple of people that have served in the police, but you have tell us a little about your background, because you're now a parapsychologist, a paranormal investigator, but you had a long-standing career in the police force.
Yeah, that's right.
Canada, was it, or America?
Yeah, no, I was.
Tell us about that.
I was with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for 15 years. That would be equivalent to the Federal Bureau of Investigation down in the United States. RCMP is unique in that it does federal policing, it does provincial policing or state policing, and it also does municipal policing. And we're actually one of the only police forces in the world that also had custom excise powers as well. So I did that for 15 years, spent 8 of those years on major crime investigations, which was mostly homicide and missing persons. I also did a little stint on sex crimes as well during my major crime time. And it was a great career. I got to move all over. I spent time in Penticton, British Columbia, Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, which is the subarctic, and back to Nova Scotia, where I was raised.
Now, Elliot, have you always had an interest in the paranormal? By the way, your camera's gone off. I just thought I'd let you know. But have you always had an interest in the paranormal, or is this something you got from experiences with in law enforcement?
No, actually, what kind of got me interested in the paranormal was television shows like Unsolved Mysteries, because I was interested in being a police officer and had a particular interest in homicide investigations, and also had an interest in the paranormal. So when I saw Unsolved Mysteries, a lot of those episodes focused on cold cases, homicide cold cases, and also had ghosts and UFO sightings. So I was really into that show. And then when X-Files came along and you had 2 law enforcement officers, Mulder and Scully, investigating paranormal cases.
Awesome show that was.
It was, and that's kind of what got me into the investigating paranormal, and also, taking educational courses in parapsychology. So I did that up until I got recruited by the RCMP in 2005. I went away for basic training, spent 6 months in Regina doing at the police academy. And then once I graduated from there, I had another 6 months of on-the-job field training. I learned very quickly, unfortunately, the RCMP was not the type of environment that they enjoyed the paranormal. I took a lot of razzing.
I was going to ask you.
I took a lot of razzing for it. In fact, a lot of similarities to Fox Mulder and how he was treated by his colleagues. So I kind of kept it quiet.
Really?
I kind of kept it quiet. Yeah, I would do courses on the side. I would keep things quiet. I would, keep up with the literature and stuff like that. But as far as doing public investigations, there was no podcasts at the time, but media interviews and all all that stuff. I didn't do that. I kind of stayed out of the public eye. And then towards the end of my career, when I had about 2 years left, I kind of, almost like your last guest said, being a psychiatrist talking about demonology, he just doesn't care what his colleagues think. And that's kind of what happened to me. And so I started to, come back into the public eye, and I retired in May of 2020. So now I just do, parapsychology full time.
That's brilliant. No, I have to say, you're very lucky in being able to do that, because you can't really hang your shingles on a career in parapsychology. It's most parapsychologists have a second job or a third job, and it's not as if it's a paid career choice. But let's go back into your law enforcement career, because you say it's very difficult. I was in the military myself, in the army, and it's not something that you talk about. But what was the first indication? Did you say to your colleagues, "Oh, I've seen a ghost," or "I've been involved in this," and then they just started ribbing you for it? Or were you actually involved in something and had an experience?
No, actually, what happened was, for some reason, and I always kind of attribute it to that I was a hard worker. I'd go to work, I'd keep my nose to the ground, I'd mind my P's and Q's. Somebody would always Google my name for some reason. And of course, when you Google my name, you'll see stuff associated with the paranormal. So how I first learned that they didn't, appreciate that was I was actually called into the staff sergeant's office. So I had a staff sergeant and a corporal questioning me about my involvement in PPRI, which is Paranormal Phenomena Research Investigation, the organization that I'm director of. I explained to them what it was, and that I informed recruiting about it, because part of the RCMP recruitment process is to tell them about any clubs and organizations that you're part of. So of course I disclosed all that. They were actually pretty malicious about it. They wanted me to write a letter to the departmental security, which does our security clearance, and explain to them that I was part of this organization, and to see if they could do a review and if they have any issues with it. So I was brand new at the time. I didn't want to cause any waves. So I wrote up the memorandum. Jeez. I sent it into departmental security. About a month later, they came back and they said, "Listen, we already know about this. It's on his personnel file. He disclosed it in his interview to the recruiter. We have no issues with it. Kind of forget about it."
Do you think, Elliot, that was your superiors, maybe their own perception, that maybe they didn't believe in the paranormal, or they thought it was kind of hoodoo? Do you think it was more or less that person's perception rather than them looking out for you or the organization?
I think that had a part of it, yes, because it was funny. One of the other corporals, was really angry to hear that they were putting me through this, and he said, like, they coach little league ball on their time off, and nobody's questioning them. You know what I mean? Like, why are you hanging around with little kids, kind of thing. So it was very malicious, and in today's policing environment now, it would actually be fully considered harassment. But again, at the time I was brand new. It was my first real career, so I didn't want to cause any waves, kind of thing. But I actually said to them, I was upset about it, and I said to them, you do realize that the RCMP used to investigate UFO sightings, right? And they had no idea. But when I was going to university at St. Mary's University, I met with a ufologist, Chris Stiles, who wrote a couple books on the Shag Harbor UFO crash. And he had tipped me off that the RCMP used to investigate UFO sightings, and they used to actually consult with Father Burke Gaffney, who was an astronomer at St. Mary's University. And he told me that in the library archives, I would be able to find actual RCMP reports on UFO sightings. So I went back to the university campus, and I made a request to see the Burke Gaffney files. And sure enough, I had photocopied about 200 pages of UFO reports that the RCMP would send to Father Burke Gaffney as an astronomer to get his opinion. They had no idea that the RCMP actually used to investigate that. Now, today they don't have any policy. Back then, they used to have policy on investigating UFOs, and one of the requirements was you had to notify Department of National Defense immediately. There's actually a couple police reports that I have where people worked a 12-hour shift. They must have been tired. They decided to go home. And when they came back on shift, there was a nasty note from their supervisor because they didn't notify DND at the time. But They kind of got rid of that policy now. But if you were still to this day to phone the police and say that, you're observing a UFO over your house or whatnot, they would still respond to it. But it's not taken as seriously as it was back in the 70s and 80s.
See, do you know, I obviously you've heard of Nick Pope. So Nick, I didn't realize Nick Pope kind of endorsed my first book, and I didn't realize, obviously, until I learned that the Ministry of Defence in Britain actually had their own UFO division, and he headed it. And I was like, we had no idea that the RAF and the Navy and the military in Britain actually took UFO sightings really seriously. It was a shock to me, honestly, it really was.
Yes. Yeah.
So is your interest in a particular type of phenomena in parapsychology, or where do you lean towards? Do you lean towards everything, or the UFO side, or?
Certainly I'm interested in it all, but I would say survival aspects of parapsychology are my favorite, particularly hauntings, poltergeist phenomena, even residual hauntings. There's some cool stories about residual hauntings as well. That seems to be my main interest. And I also found as well, so when I created Paranormal Phenomena Research Investigation, I was part of another group at the time, the Center for Parapsychological Studies in Canada, that was headed up by my colleague and friend, Daryl Walsh, who was also a parapsychologist. At the time, they strictly did parapsychology, so ESP, mind matter interaction, and survival. So I created PPRI to kind of deal with the overflow, I guess. So any sort of UFO sightings,
what was missing?
Cryptozoology sightings, anything like that. But what I found is running a paranormal organization group, the majority of people that contact you are contacting you about hauntings. So at the end of the day, that's kind of what I ended up specializing in. And so I guess that's why I have such an interest in it.
Why go down obviously you've went to great lengths to educate yourself, which a lot of people in the paranormal world don't. You and I both know you can go out there's paranormal groups everywhere, and you just need to get yourself a digital camera, set yourself up, build a Wix website, and you're away. But you're quite serious. You were like, okay, you've got a doctorate. Oh, hello. There's a little wee person coming in. Hello there, little in.
That's my little teething.
I love your little tuft.
Oh yeah, that's my little.
You want to say it?
I call her my little demon because she's like a possessed friggin' child at times.
That's awesome. Actually, there's a colleague of mine. She's got a little boy, and I've interviewed loads of people, and when she's been co-hosting interviews, he started coming up and speaking through the microphone. So there's loads of interviews where he's actually talking to people over there and welcoming them on the show and stuff like that, which is, I guess, another show and another subject matter. But
that's great.
So I don't mind it. It's all fun, and it's meant to be. If you can't get your whole family involved, who can you get involved? So you decided, you took it seriously, and you've got a doctorate in, is it psychology? And
it's actually parapsychology. So I did my Bachelor of Arts in Criminology at St. Mary's University. At the time there wasn't many parapsychology programs around. So where I started getting my formal training was at the Nova Scotia Community College. Daryl Walsh was teaching a couple of parapsychology courses. My family and I had just moved from Sydney, Nova Scotia to Halifax, Nova Scotia. And my mother saw an article in the newspaper about a parapsychologist that was teaching parapsychology at the Nova Scotia Community College. So I signed up and took his 2 courses. And after I completed the 2 courses, I got the certificate from Nova Scotia Community College, and he invited me to be part of the CPSC. And that's where I got my field investigation experience. After that, Stratford Career Institute offered a diploma in parapsychology, which they don't offer now as well. It's really sad, as you know. Parapsychology is
very difficult. It's still
kind of like the redheaded stepchild, I guess, if you had to use an analogy. The psychologist just they kind of don't believe in it, I guess, and it's kind of funny at the conferences. They always say that it's actually the physicists, that are dealing with hard science are more of a believer in parapsychology than psychologists.
It's true.
So I completed my diploma in parapsychology, and then I started doing master's in counseling psychology, and then this PhD program had opened up at American International University in California. And so I had decided to do that and pursue, as much formal training in parapsychology that I could. And then even since then, I still take courses whenever I can get them. And the one positive thing I will say about COVID is that a lot of universities are learning that they can deliver courses that were traditionally taught in class over like online. So I always have my eye on this witchcraft course at the University of Ottawa. And because of COVID, they actually put that online. So I got to take the witchcraft course. I just took an Ancient Monsters course from the University of Glasgow. And apparently in January of 2022, they're going to have an ancient demonology course that kind of talks about ancient Eastern demonology. So I definitely want to take that course. So I really encourage people to kind of check the university websites right now, because they're starting to teach more and more courses on it. In fact, there's a course here in Halifax, which I haven't taken, but it's a ghost course that falls under religious studies, and it talks about kind of the ghost phenomena and apparitions and beliefs, and it would be a really cool course to take. And of course, as you know, where I met you is through the Rhine Education Center.
Yeah, Rhine Institute. Yeah,
I take as many courses from them as I can. I find every course I've taken from them, I always learn something new, whether it's a new study that's come out or a new theory. And also then
it's very academic. It's very academic. It's not new agey stuff or even just the believing in anything. It's that's what I like. I like the academia side of it and actually having some science. I've always said, we need more science and spirit and more spirit and science. So maybe one day we'll actually get there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great program, and I've signed up for so many different courses through them, and the networking as well is great. They have instructors. A lot of them are members of the Parapsychological Association. You get to meet people. Sometimes they'll have special guests on there, that have actually done research.
Do you think we have a good balance in parapsychology of skeptics and believers and in-betweeners, or do you think that we're top-heavy with more skeptics than anything else?
No, it seems like being involved in the field of parapsychology seems like most people are believers from what I've seen. I mean, I know that there's skeptics and skeptical organizations out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But no, I guess the people I surround myself with seem to be more believers. If anyone's the most critical out of people in my group, actually, it would be my fiance, Sarah Crawley, who's our chief financial officer. She every investigation, she really puts me through the ringer, and really tries to make me dig deep to show her proof of the paranormal. So.
I think that's brilliant, because I'm always, what I've said in a few things is like, I will take it on board and I'll say it's interesting, but it wants further investigate. And even me as working as a medium, I'm very, very skeptical a lot of things. And that's because I want to, bring and blend science and everything together. But I think I would say in my perception, I would say over the last 5 years, there's been more of a balance between the skeptics and believers in parapsychology. I think before that, even from the SPR and other organizations, I think it was top heavy with skeptics. And it's only been really in the last 5 years that I've seen a great dramatic change as more and more evidence or research and things are coming out of it. So you love getting involved in the science of everything, and obviously, but you've got a passion for field investigation, haven't you? You've been on some good field investigations. Now, I want to ask you, are you the type of organization that would go to, I don't know, just famous locations, or are you primarily dealt with, I've got a phone call coming in because someone's having a problem?
Yeah, it's option number two. We're not so much a proactive organization as we are a reactive organization.
Reactive, love it.
Yeah, we don't go to local graveyards and contact local museums. Like we did do that way back in the day when we first started, which got us, some, especially the junior members that didn't have any experience, got them some investigative experience. But today we're more focused on reacting. It's been fairly quiet, and I've talked to other people in the field as well, and they find the same thing. Although there was that newspaper article which said because of COVID-19, people staying at home, there was more reports of haunted houses. But from the people I've talked to in the field, it's been fairly quiet, unfortunately.
I think there's been a lot more people dabbling, but I have a saying that most 90% of people, or I would say 99% of people, haunt themselves, and there's actually nothing going on. You hear a squeak and you think or you watch Ghost Hunters and you think you hear a squeak and that's it, you're haunted. Or they get out a Ouija board and then before they know it, their life's upside down, and really it's just them. They've just created it psychosomatically in their mind. So with the work that you're doing now, being reactive, I guess at some point I would expect with all the knowledge and everything that you have, that you'll want to teach at some point.
Yes, we're actually, Daryl Walsh and I are actually designing an online introduction to parapsychology course right now. It's kind of funny, I guess, because of the pandemic and lots of people working from home and things like that, they're looking for things to do. So I noticed even the Rhine has admitted that their enrollment is up. The introduction to parapsychology course taught by the Kessler Parapsychology Unit at the University of Edinburgh is booked up solid until next year.
It is. I think even at end of 22 or the end of 23 is booked up in it.
Yeah. It's nuts. So Daryl and I are actually in the process right now of developing an introduction to parapsychology course, because he used to teach apparitions and hauntings at the Nova Scotia Community College, and he also taught ESP, reincarnation, and other type of survival, near-death experiences as well. So between the two of us, and I do a haunting lecture for free. I travel around Halifax Regional Municipality, and I do a lecture called Hauntings, Exploring Apparitions, Poltergeists, and Demons. So we both have kind of some lecture and teaching experience. So we're going to pair up together and get this course designed, which we're about halfway through. It's actually a lot more work than I thought, because it's not just a matter of throwing together some PowerPoint slides. I'm trying to actually go through and find like the most recent studies as well, so that, I could say, the last most recent near-death experience study, for example, is AWARE, and they have AWARE 2.
That was doing. What's his name? Not Parnham. Is it Parnham?
Yeah, it's, how do you say his name? It's, starts with a P.
Yeah, it is a P, isn't it? I think it's Dr. Parnham or Pry, some of the guy, I don't know. Reminds me to get him in.
Sam Parnina, I think, is his last name.
That's it. Yes, absolutely spot on. You disappeared again. Oh, lost your signal.
No.
Oh, we're back. Audio is back. Here we go. So, now you mentioned you have a couple of times. You have an interest in demonology.
Yes, yeah.
Not so much with other people around you though, but you certainly do. Where's the interest from that stem from?
I think.
Let me precursor that question. Do you believe in demons or not?
I do. Yes. Yep. I do. I don't. I had the case in Exeter was probably the closest case that I ever came to involving a demon, but basically what happened is there was a family in Rhode Island, Exeter, Rhode Island. There was a female woman that always had spirits attracted to her ever since she was a little girl. There were 3 different psychics that had reached out to her family members. It wasn't her going to psychic fairs or anything like that, but when her sister would go to see a psychic, they would always have messages to pass along to Haley. And one of the messages was that she has the ability to be a medium, but she doesn't know how to use that skill. So these spirits seem to be attracted to her because they think they can communicate with her and that she can help them. So when they grew up in their house in Cranston, Rhode Island, they had lots of paranormal phenomena happening. The family, the mom, the dad, the sister, and Haley all witnessed apparitions. And they actually had the television show Ghost Hunters come on and investigate their home.
I was going to say, because that's now because you've obviously mentioned the names and things like that. It's obviously quite a publicized case. So
yeah. And Haley's the one that co-wrote Evil in Exeter with me. then
I'm going to read that.
Then she moved to Exeter, Rhode Island, in a fairly new home, a fairly new subdivision. But again, she would experience paranormal phenomena. So when I met her, she had kind of warned me that whenever you come over to the house, you may experience some phenomena. It seems to happen whenever she has guys over. She's been told by a previous psychic that this male entity or male presence is very jealous. So sure enough, when I started hanging out with her, I would see, things happen. I'd see doors open and close on their own, doors lock and unlock on their own. I heard footsteps, 3 distinct footsteps approach me. I was doing a blessing in one of the children's room at the time. It was just me and Haley at home. And I could see the doorknob turn 3/4 of the way. And when I pulled it open on the other side, there was absolutely nobody on the other side. And of course, being a police officer, I would be very skeptical of anything that happened. I would try and find a rational explanation for it. In fact, one week the kids didn't sleep for 3 or 4 nights in a row. They kept hearing scratching on the wall. So I would go outside and just check and make sure there was no tree branches scratching against the window, that there was not a squirrel on the windowsill.
Looking for all the natural causes.
Exactly. What any good paranormal investigator would do is look for the rational explanations first before, looking for the supernatural. But she had actually seen this entity once before at the Cranston house. She was dating an abusive boyfriend, and they got back from the fair, and he was going to pop her balloon in the kitchen and pull her hair. And she had a look on her face. And when he turned around behind him, they could both see this tall entity standing in the door frame. He had like a pale gray face, almost like the color of the moon, and he just had these 2 black eyes, like that were completely black. It almost just looked like black eye sockets. So their family friend was actually Father Bob Bailey, who is a exorcist that has been on a few different paranormal shows. He had come and blessed the house a few times, and it didn't work. And eventually, when I was involved and there was all that activity happening at the house, we contacted him again, but he had been reassigned from doing deliverance work to hospital work at the time. So he kind of sent us some prayers from the Roman ritual, and he said he was too weak to face a demon at this time. As his health wasn't in the best shape either. So we ended up having to resort to using. Oh, sorry, just going back to that actually. When the entity was described to him, he said that usually if you see those types of eyes, it's usually a damned soul. And as far as the Roman Catholic Church is concerned, a damned soul is to be treated the same way that a demon would be treated, which I found very interesting and also very powerful to be coming from, this Roman Catholic figurehead. So what we had to do were, the family friend that, used to do deliverance work was not available. We had to resort to use of a medium who we, trusted. And she was non-denominational. So she came in, she had her sage and a few different herbs and things like that. And when we were upstairs in the master bedroom, she had put the pie plate with the lit on fire herbs and sage right in the middle of the bed. And I had the FLIR, the forward infrared thermal camera with us. And right in between, on my right side and Haley's left side, we could feel this ice cold spot appear when we're in the bedroom with the psychic. And I checked it with the FLIR. There was no change in temperature, nothing showing up on it, which is actually not uncommon. Yeah, and it's actually not uncommon during a paranormal investigation. People report the sensation of it, but the equipment doesn't actually pick it up. So then all of a sudden, the medium is calling the entity over towards her. And on the bed cover, and there's pictures in the book, on the bed cover, you'll start to see these distorted footprints appear that came across the bed cover, walked around the burning sage and herbs. And then we didn't tell the medium what we were seeing on the FLIR at that time. And she said, I feel like the presence is over by me. And I mean, according to the FLIR, there was obviously something that had walked across the bed and gone over towards her. So anyway, she said her non-denominational prayers. And I do remember she said the Michael the Archangel prayer. And then she felt that the presence had dissipated. And the marks on the bed did dissipate, but we didn't feel any different. So we said that to her. We said, well, we don't feel any different. And she said, well, it's not like in the movies, like the glass doesn't blow out of the windows and the roof doesn't crack and the house doesn't shake. And she said, all I can tell you is that the feeling's gone. And like I said, the image disappeared off the FLIR as well. So
she's absolutely right, actually, because I've often said to people, even when I've lectured, it's the battlefield is in the mind. The phenomena is just the expression of it. And the only way that you're ever going to deal with a malevolent intelligence is to deal with it through prayer. And it's not tied down to any particular denomination. Now, I have a Catholic upbringing. I understand it, it's interesting, though, Elliot, that you mention about the FLIR, because I have a love-hate relationship with technology. So, like, I've always maintained, if you're into an investigation, the best thing that you've got is going to be a camera. The rest of it is just going to measure. It's just going to measure atmospheric changes. That is data. That's gathering data. It has got no proof of any existence of paranormal phenomena unless of what you see materially. So it's interesting that you say, and it's good that people hear that there's not always a change with this, because often an agent from the other side, especially if and there's a big if, it was a demoniacal force or something else, it's a lot more intelligent than we are, and probably a lot more intelligent than any equipment, and can probably actually negate and get its way around it. So it's interesting that you make a note of that. Now, do you actually use a lot of equipment on your investigations, or?
We do have a fair amount. Yeah, we have, like I said, we have a FLIR. We have 2 different EMF readers. One actually I got it because I took Lloyd Auerbach's 4-week course about paranormal and technology, and he was telling us about the GQ EMF reader, which is a great EMF reader. It actually records all the measurements for you. So it's not like the old days where you're going around with your notebook and you're in master bedroom and this is what the EMF reading is. It actually records it all on the device itself, and you can upload it to your computer to analyze it later.
That's crazy.
So we do have 2 EMF readers. I'll tell you a story too about the EMF reader in a minute, the older one. We have 3 Nest cameras that we purchased, so we can set those up in the home. It can send notifications to your phone. You can pop on your phone and check it. It records everything, so they're very handy as well. We also have, we haven't used it yet, and I need to read the manual, and that's another thing that we'll discuss in a minute. But we have an infrasound device that can detect infrasound, because there's been lots of studies that have come out now.
Oh, that's expensive.
Yeah,
that is.
That was an expensive piece of equipment. The other tool that we have that we also have not used and have not had time to properly use it is we purchased, basically it's a version of the Michael Persinger's God helmet. When he passed away...
All the measurement cables and the diodes and stuff like that. Really?
Yeah. So we had, and that was quite expensive piece of equipment too.
I was going to say that's not off of Amazon.
No. So when Michael Persinger passed away, I guess his research assistants had the rights to it, so they sell it. I think it's called the Shira helmet. And it's basically like a home version of the God helmet, and it can apparently open up your psychic abilities if you wear it, and do the same thing that it did in the lab with Michael Persinger, cause you to see apparitions, things like that. So it would be interesting if you can find the right level that opens up your psychic abilities or makes you more apt to perceive psychic events. It would be interesting to use that during an investigation as well. So we do have quite a bit, of equipment that we've acquired. Again, we're a nonprofit organization, so a lot of this is either funded by myself or my co-founder, Spencer.
Isn't it
Collier.
always?
Yeah, we've dropped. Actually, I always I think I said it on another podcast. So Sarah Crawley, my fiance, is our chief financial officer for the organization, and she actually has suspended my spending right now because I had purchased a few pieces of equipment that was quite expensive, and when she was doing up the report for the government, because we are registered in the province of Nova Scotia, we're also registered in the state of Massachusetts, and we're also registered federally in Canada. So we have to report our finances, and when she was doing up the finances, she put a halt on my spending. So
yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. I mean, I'm not a tech geek when it comes to, I'll be honest, right? I don't work with a lot of paranormal investigation teams. I've worked with a couple. I've never found any that I've totally trusted. And people that I trust are few and far between. And so I don't have I have cameras and stuff like that, and a few people that I will rely on, a scientist and a psychologist, stuff like that. But I'm predominantly using mediumship, where I always believe that there should be, and I know maybe some other people think this, and I'll ask you what you think about this, whether you should have a good quality medium within your team. There's a bit of an argument here, whether you utilize mediumship or not. Well, how do you feel about that? Because obviously you've used the medium, so
yeah.
I'm guessing you kind of are okay with it.
I'm pro medium. It's like you said, though, it would have to be a certain type. I do think that some people have that gift, and some are very accurate, and then there's others that have been unfortunately proven as frauds, and there are those ones that go out and try and my colleague Daryl Walsh calls them grief vampires, but they focus on getting money from people and pretending that they're communicating with their lost loved one, and unfortunately that still exists in this field.
Oh, it's massive. It's something that we fight against all the time. It's massive. And also there's an element as well. There's a mediumship element where they think they're mediums, but they're not really. They're not connected with the spirit in any way, and they're mainly reading psychic energy, and they don't understand the discernment. That's why you really shouldn't go on a 7-day course or a month course to try and develop as a medium. It should be a long-term continual development over many, many, many years before you do anything. But yeah, it is a big problem. So I mean, I'm glad that you're pro that side, because I think it's a very, very important aspect to it. So when you're investigating and you're working with your equipment and other stuff like that, and you come to work, you deal with the clients. What's the important relationship between you and the clients that you're fundamentally, this is of utmost importance how we deal with this client? Because I've seen nightmares where they leave them hanging.
Yeah. So our goal is to help the client. And like you said, you see so many groups and you've heard so many stories where somebody's looking for parapsychological help. They'll call a group will come in. And I've heard stories where they've actually made it worse. And then they come in and usually they do a 1-night investigation or maybe a 2-night investigation. They collect their data and then they just disappear. And they don't actually, they're not there to help the client. So one example of how we helped the client just this year, we were contacted by a lady who in the southwestern part of the United States, who said that she was either having a demonic haunting or a really negative haunting. And she was outside our area, so we only service Atlantic Canada, which is New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland, and the New England area, which would be Connecticut, Maine, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Vermont. So it was outside our area, but
you go as far as you actually go as far as New England.
Yeah, I have 2 investigators. My co-founder Spencer Collier's in Boston, and I have a really good researcher that's in Maine, and Mike that's in Maine is also a photographer, so he's got a skill set that's very valuable to us. So anyway, because it was COVID and it was slow, I thought it would be a great opportunity for some of our newer investigators, to do some interviews and get used to writing some parapsychological reports and things like that. So we decided to help this lady. So we interviewed her and her family and some independent witnesses that she had provided us with. We tracked down other paranormal investigators that had investigated her house and talked to them. We she actually had medical done, and so I obtained a copy of her medical. And throughout the course of the whole thing, we determined that she may need to see what's called a clinical parapsychologist. And this is something new, that's kind of a new term that's being used in the field of parapsychology. But it's basically, in fact, your previous guest could almost be considered a clinical parapsychologist, really, because it's somebody that has either either a psychologist or a psychiatrist that has a background in parapsychology. And so they could actually do counseling for your clients, especially if they have stress from the haunting, and like when I was involved in the Exeter investigation, that was very stressful. So I could understand how that could create anxiety between clients and things like that. So in this case, we learned through the medical information that it would be best that she speak to a clinical parapsychologist, and we don't have one at PPRI. My colleague Daryl is in the process of obtaining his clinical psychology PhD. So once he obtains that, he would be considered a clinical parapsychologist. But that's the other thing. We're not afraid to reach out to, if it's outside our expertise, we're not afraid to reach out. And so we ended up contacting a clinical parapsychologist in Texas. She's been passed off to them. Obviously, I don't know what happened from there because of the client confidentiality, but if that was a case where we just didn't leave her high and dry and say like,
see, I love that.
Yeah, because
Elliot, that's outstanding. That makes my heart sing, because I've had so many cases myself, or even just people that have been left in disaster with paranormal groups and they don't know how to deal with it, and then it becomes more of a counselling and education than it does even an investigation, because the damage is done. And it is. This is where it's interesting, because I've got one of my writers in the magazine. She contacted me the other day and she says, I'm really getting interested in, investigating the paranormal, and I want to learn. And I know that you'll not be happy if you go, just join another paranormal group or something. I says, no. She says, will you put me in touch with the right person in the area? So I'm going to, I like that. I like the fact that she's approached and she wants to learn it from a real good scientific point of view, and to learn all the ins and outs of how to deal with client relationships and how to deal with the medical side and everything else. So that makes me happy, because I would say there's very, very little paranormal teams out. I would say actually many paranormal teams are just in for events and stuff like that, and just and don't necessarily
either that or they don't know. Like because no. I'll admit, like early on, when I first started PPRI, like we would go to the homes and we would do an overnight investigation. We would collect our data. We'd probably provide them with our opinion on, like, it could be something supernatural or it might not be something supernatural. And then that's kind of it, right? So it wasn't until later on when you get that formal education and you're talking to people, of high caliber, like, Lloyd Auerbach and John Kruth, those guys. And you realize, like, I treat it like if somebody's contacting me about a haunting, they're contacting me because they need some sort of help.
They're suffering.
Yeah. Because otherwise, like, why are they contacting? If it's just grandma and the smell of baking cookies roaming around the house, they're probably not contacting somebody. So you got to take it seriously. It just reminded me too about the EMF story. So one of the fallacies in parapsychology is that we call it ghost hunting equipment, but I mean, there's really no equipment that exists today that can actually detect a ghost.
No,
it's all just equipment that can be used to help rule out natural causes. So, for example, a recent study is saying that carbon monoxide poisoning can cause people to experience haunting characteristics. So one of the pieces of equipment that I just purchased for PPRI was a 4-type gas detector. And it detects carbon monoxide, oxygen, low-level explosives, and H2S gas. And the H2S gas would be interesting because it has a sulfuric smell, and that would be interesting in a dynamic haunting case. But
because they smell the putrid odors, and that can be sulfuric. Yeah, it can be sulfur in the environment, in the water, especially in the water, because they treat it in the water a lot of the times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you smell water coming out of the tap, and it's got that sulfuric smell. So a tool like that is, it can be used for ghost hunting, but it's not it's not actually a tool that can detect a ghost. But the EMF story was interesting. So we got a case to investigate a private residence in Kentville, Nova Scotia. And the woman reported seeing a ghost dog, possibly seeing faces show up in her photographs, and seeing an apparition come down the stairwell. So she contacted us. It was an older home built in the 1800s. They had just moved in there. They were only there for maybe 6 months, started experiencing some activity. So sent a small team of us down one night. We spent the night there. Oh, sorry. The other thing that was happening at this house was pennies would materialize out of nowhere, which was interesting. So get a small team together. We go down. We spend the night at the house. Eventually, halfway through the night, the dad takes the 2 daughters to bed, and he goes upstairs, and it's just us with the wife left downstairs. And every hour on the hour, I'd get an investigator to go and check the cameras and make sure that they're still recording and the battery's still good. And at this one particular time, so when we first started the investigation, of course, we swept the house, made sure it was clean. They showed us a jar full of pennies that they had claimed that they had collected that just materialized out of nowhere. To me, it didn't hold any value because somebody could literally have just put pennies in a jar and are showing you and telling you this story. But what made it...
There's no evidence of it.
Yes, and what made it real for me is that at one point, it was early in the morning, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, one of my investigators went to go check to make sure that the battery was still recording on the camcorder, and right by the base of the tripod, a penny had materialized there. And of course, when we checked the tape, you couldn't hear anything, and it was outside the focus of the camera, but you could hear the investigator walking up to check the camera and then call out to us to tell us that.
So the time was, yeah.
So I still have that penny to this day. I have it down in my file cabinet down in the office there. But that was really interesting. So we wanted to come back to the house for a second night. We were also getting EMF readings near the stairwell, and I'll come back to that. So we go back for a second night of investigation, about a week or two later, bring a bigger team. Actually, we had a team outside. They were using night vision equipment. And then we had a team inside. And we were getting those EMF readings again by the stairwell where the family would report seeing a female apparition come down. So one of my investigators had the idea to check with the homeowners and see if it was okay to turn off their power and see what happens to the EMF readings. So they gave us permission, went downstairs, killed all the fuses. And sure enough, the EMF reading near the stairwell disappeared. So turned the power back on, and the exact same reading appeared again near the stairwell. So the investigator asked me to stomp my foot upstairs so that he could follow the trail of wires underneath the house in the basement. And when he got near to where I was stomping, he could see some old wires that were unshielded, and they were giving off the electromagnetic radiation, which was causing the EMF reader to pick up on it. So
brilliant.
So that was a case where the EMF reader did what it was designed to do. It was picking up unshielded wires that were giving off a dangerous amount of, electromagnetic energy. So we were able to tell the homeowners, and then it would be up to them, obviously, if they wanted to hire an electrician to replace that, in case it causes a fire or causes any sort of insurance issues. But what happened later that night is one of the investigators that was outside with the night vision, there was 2 of them outside, and they saw somebody moving in the upstairs bedroom. So they got on the 2-way radios and asked if anybody was upstairs. We were all downstairs with the homeowners at the time. So one of the investigators said, "You stay out here. I'm going to go into the house, go up to the bedroom and check it out." Goes in. When he opens the door, he said that he saw a little girl apparition sitting on the bed. And so, of course, he's scared, terrified. He eventually gets the nerve to call us on the radio. So we come upstairs, and by that time the apparition had disappeared. But we were getting EMF readings in the room, and we had a reverend on the team at the time. And when we opened the closet door, there were 6 of us in the room at the time. And when we opened that closet door, all of a sudden the most coldest gust of wind went through all 6 of us, and it actually felt like it went like right through your body. It like took your breath away, and then it just kind of dissipated, and then the EMF reading stopped. So at the time, our team member that was a reverend, said a little prayer or whatnot in the room, and once we all calmed down, it was quite the experience. It was just this ice cold Arctic feel of wind that I've never felt before. And I policed, like I told you, up in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, in the subarctic.
So, yeah, you felt cold, boy.
I felt cold. Yeah, and this was even colder than that. So, so it was really interesting. The other thing that we did find out about that house too is that they weren't seeing faces in their photographs. What it was is because it was an older home, 1800 home, it had that nice kind of cherry wood colored door frames that had like a high gloss on it. So whenever they would take a picture, it would look like there was a face in there, which is known as pareidolia. So
don't get me started on pareidolia. That's another, you and I are going to come back on another show, on another one. We're going to go into that alone, right? Carry on.
So it turned out that was pareidolia. So in that house, I mean, based on what my investigator, who was trusted, had witnessed, he witnessed an apparition. Obviously, there was something going on there, but we were able to rule out two natural causing phenomena. One, which was the unshielded wires, and the other one, which was pareidolia, visual pareidolia.
Which brings me actually to a really interesting concept, right? Because and you're probably the same. I've thought of this for many years, that when there's claims of paranormal phenomena or not normal phenomena that's happening in a home, do you believe that there could be a small percentage that is actually paranormal related and the rest could be a mixture between natural phenomena and paranormal phenomena? That would help you kind of understand where a family has kind of blown it all up out of proportion, but there might only be just a small amount.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And I think that when you're exposed to haunting characteristics as well, because they're frightening and they can cause like a heightened state of anxiety, I think that sometimes people would start to contribute maybe normal things as being paranormal. And I have run into that a couple of times where, the family thinks that it's something paranormal, but having that outside perspective, somebody that's not living there 24/7 come in, and you can kind of see the dynamics and a little bit clearer than the family that's actually like entrenched in that situation. And
what about the families or the people that are desperate for paranormal phenomena? Absolutely desperate.
And there are those for sure. And sometimes, and Lloyd Auerbach mentioned this to me as well, sometimes you just have to walk away from certain cases. And if you have people that are basically trying to manifest, paranormal phenomena, and you're in there and you're telling them like there's nothing wrong with your house, but they want to believe so badly that it's haunted. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and you can't change somebody's opinion. So
let me jump on to another controversial point within parapsychology and mediumship and paranormal, whatever, anything is out there. EVP.
Yes.
Are you a bit? Let's talk about EVP. Right? I have my thoughts on EVP. Give me yours. What's your thoughts on EVP, Elliot?
Well, EVP, I'm very skeptical of. So I always call that a subjective piece of evidence, because right now, as it stands, there's 4 different theories on what an EVP is. One is that it's a discarnate entity. That's what we all hope that it is. We hope that it's that discarnate entity trying to pass a message along to us on the recording device. The other thing that it could be, and I actually found a real case of it, of somebody that I know, is that it could be telepathy or psi that's placed on the recording device. And so there's a well-known paranormal investigator. She runs her own radio show as well. It's called the Outer Realm radio show with Michelle DeRoche. So Michelle had actually experienced this herself. So one night she was supposed to go interview a family about a haunting. It was the initial interview. Her daughter was sick that night, and she left her daughter with her husband at home. So while she's at this meeting with the family, she keeps saying to herself, like, oh, my daughter's sick. I got to get home. My daughter's sick. My daughter's sick. And so they do the initial interview, and then later on her techie is taking a look at the recording. And on the recording, you can hear Michelle just like interrupt the family as they're talking, saying, I got to get home to my daughter. She's sick. But the natural flow of the conversation didn't make any sense. Like, nobody stopped talking. They just continued on saying with what they're saying. And so he called Michelle and told her that. And she said, I didn't say that out loud. I was thinking it at that time. And sure enough, it got recorded on the device. So,
see, that's interesting. I could buy that, absolutely.
So
I'll buy that all day long.
So that was like a real case that I actually learned of that had telekinesis recorded on a device that came out as like an EVP. Another theory, obviously, is the audio pareidolia, and that's because our brains are wired to try and make sense of nonsensical sounds. And then, of course, the fourth theory is some sort of radio or cellular interference. And I actually had a case of that. So I got contacted, I think it was late last year, by a gentleman that was conversing with his friend on Facebook Messenger, but they were using the, instead of typing it all out, they were using the voice notes and sending each other voice notes back and forth. And in one of these voice notes, you can hear him talking. He's responding to his friend's question, but all of a sudden there's like this male voice that's like really loud and deep, and it's like talking over the conversation. And it did not sound like your typical EVP. It wasn't like a quiet whisper. It was like very prominent. So I reached out to a friend of mine that used to work for the RCMP Technological Crime Unit, and it was his job to analyze digital evidence. So I sent him the EVP. I explained the situation to him. He was able to isolate the two sounds. So he had the male voice that appeared, and then he had the regular guy talking. He checked it all out. It wasn't faked or anything like that. The only thing that he could think of is that it was some sort of crossover through Facebook. It was some sort of interference that had somehow gotten into their audio recording, but it was nothing that was faked. And like I said, it didn't sound like that typical EVP. So it would kind of make sense to me, based on this guy's job that analyzes digital evidence, that it was some sort of crossover. So that's the problem with EVPs, is that you got the four different theories on what they are.
Yeah.
So I always say, if you caught an EVP at a haunted location where people are seeing apparitions, or you're getting EMF readings, and there's all kinds of other things, plates are flying out of the cabinet, then it holds more value than going to the graveyard, getting a little whisper, and saying that it's a ghost.
I have another, well, I suppose a theory, but you'll understand this from your law enforcement days, is when there's surreptitious recordings of listening devices that are operating at a frequency far below the norm. We do know that private investigators and all sorts of people, even though they're supposed to government rights to, put listening devices in, we know what happens. We know that corporate espionage happens. We know that it is happening all the time. And I've thought to myself, I wonder if what they're picking up in EVP could actually be also a surreptitious listening device that's actually crossing over. Yeah,
you never know. I mean, technology is a funny thing. I mean, sometimes things don't operate the way that we expect them to.
I mean, I'm very skeptical EVP, and I normally kind of, I'd say, it's like pareidolia, the earlugs, you're listening and making it up. Because I haven't, even when I've heard Class A that they say, I can't 100% say that that's natural, that's phenomena that's indicative of something that's that class. Because, there's so much that, it don't matter how much you believe or how much, we know about it, or, if you're going to believe in EVP, it doesn't matter, you're going to believe in it. But I'm very, 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 very skeptical of it. And like you, unless there is a pattern of phenomena that goes along with it.
Yeah, and actually photographs are becoming a lot like that now too. Like back in the day when somebody would submit a photograph to you, it would hold a little bit more weight. But today, actually in my haunting lecture, I actually show a photograph of my niece and nephew that they had professionally done. And the only thing that is in that photograph that's real are my niece and nephew. It's a picture of them sitting on a dock with a lake underneath. You can see the reflection in the lake and all that stuff. It's all fake. It's all digital. The only thing that was real was them. And now you've got this deep fake technology. There's a video going around. You might have seen it with Tom Cruise, and it's not really Tom Cruise. But there's artificial intelligence programs now that could take a few seconds of your voice, and it can mimic it and then people can type out what they want you to say and it'll sound like you're actually saying it. So they're really concerned about like politicians or celebrities or people being in high power to have these fake videos of them released. And it was getting like that before as well. Before I retired from the police force, the police were actually having difficulty determining what's real and what's not real with digital evidence.
Do you think, I mean, obviously it's clear to me, but you obviously, for those that are listening outside and your work, do you think your career in law enforcement has made you a better investigator and more, scientifically minded?
Yes, absolutely. It has, for sure. It's definitely, I've taken my interview skills that I learned from policing and I've taken that into my parapsychological work because I learned that it's important to interview people in person because you can see their body language, preferably at the location where it's occurring, because sometimes you can see some sociological things going on there. You can see maybe there's some influence from the family. It could be something as simple as, we saw the apparition yesterday night, right, honey? Right? And it's like subjective, subjective information that's being put into people's minds.
Feeding them.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the same with pareidolia as well, because it's people will look at it and say, my God, I can see that face in that smoke. And they're like, yeah, it is. And then everybody believes it.
Yeah, and it's the same with EVPs.
I'm normally the one standing going, you're nuts.
It's the same with EVPs. Like somebody will say, listen to this EVP. It says, help me. But then once you're told what it says, I find it's almost hard to get rid of that. Like, you know what I mean? It's hard to just listen to it yourself and make up your own mind because you've already been told that it says help me, and then that's what you're going to think it says.
Now, you've written a couple of books, which I'm going to read now, and one that you wrote with a friend of yours about a haunting, which is it on Audible, the one about the haunting?
It's on ebook, and it is paperback. Yeah, I don't have an Audible one. Yeah, I should look into that.
I've got to say, I'm requesting an Audible one because, and it's a bit of selfishness really, because I will sit with the books and I'll read them, but my wife, she also wants to listen to them. So we've got into a thing now where we buy real haunted stories on Audible, and while we're driving, we listen to them and we analyze them and we discuss them. So. My official request to you is to get it on Audible. Yes, I will get it online, but yes, get it on Audible as well so that we can listen to it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that because you're the second person that's recently mentioned that to me. So it might be something that I look into releasing an Audible version, especially for my third book that's supposed to come out this fall. So,
well, what's your third one about?
The third one is called More Supernatural Encounters from Law Enforcement. So what happened is after I wrote Evil in Exeter, my mother actually had encouraged me to write another book. And I told her, I said, well, these types of cases don't come along every day. I've been investigating the paranormal for 24 years, and the Exeter case was probably, one of the craziest cases that I've ever investigated. So then I started thinking, well, what else can I write about? Like maybe some old case files or anything like that. Then I started thinking, well, my true passion is law enforcement and parapsychology. So I said, I'll reach out to a few law enforcement friends of mine and just see if they have any experiences. So I did that. I started with some sheriff friends of mine, and they told me about haunted courthouses, and reached out to another friend of mine that was a security guard at the Halifax shopping center, and he told me a few stories about the mall. And next thing I know, for the first book, Supernatural Encounters, I had 50 stories collected. So then once that came out, I had more people contacting me through email, phone calls, at book signings that were law enforcement that had more stories. And so right now, I think with More Supernatural Encounters, I have roughly 41 new stories, I think.
That's brilliant.
From law enforcement. Yeah. So, and it's fun for me because, like I said, they're both my two passions. So I really enjoy writing those kind of books. So.
And it's because of that passion that we've invited you on. As you know, we have the Parawize conference in 2022, and you're joining an excellent lineup, including Sheldrake and Lloyd and all the other people. You're actually going to be joining us and telling us some of these stories and talking about your law enforcement parapsychology days. That's right. Yes, yeah, and I'm looking forward to working on that over the next year because I think you can definitely tell some really interesting stories. One law enforcement story I like telling is a story. She's deceased now, but it was a psychic
named Dorothy Allison, and she was helping the New York City homicide unit to investigate a missing person. And she could see an oil drum. She could see the number 222, and she could see what was the third thing? It was a rock. Sorry, there was a rock, 222, and an oil drum. And this didn't make any sense whatsoever to the police at the time. But 2 years later, they actually found her body on Staten Island, tucked into an oil drum, and it was next to a rock that had the number 222 spray painted on it.
See?
And at the time, it didn't make any sense to them at all, but they made note of it. And then when they found the body, it all made sense to them at that point. But it was 2 years later.
That's why I really believe that there should be some really good standards for not only mediumship, but psychic workers as well to be able to work. I think law enforcement should look at using, I hate to use the word gifted individuals because that's really not really where I want to go with it, but using people that have developed their abilities, their psi abilities, if you like, or their mediumship abilities to help law enforcement. I've helped law enforcement in my past as well, and I think it's very worthwhile. But of course, you can't prove anything. All you're doing is giving a hypothesis of what you experience, and if they run with it and they deal with it, and they get something out of it, that's fantastic, But I definitely think it should, we should use it more. I don't think we're ever going to come to the day where you actually have a psychic or a medium standing in a court of law and say, yeah, he did it. He's like, he murdered them.
No, for sure. And I mean, like sometimes there are, cases where law enforcement do use mediums. One of the stories in my new book.
Noreen Renier is a famous woman who did it. I mean, she's famously worked with the FBI and local law enforcement. She was, well renowned for it. Yeah,
and it's really interesting when they do. So I contacted the gentleman. The stories in my new book that's coming in. His name is Chuck, and he's a former police officer. He did 32 years with the Salem Police Department, but he's also a medium, and he actually experienced a lot of the same stuff I did with the kind of the harassment and stuff at work. So he kept his abilities quiet. But after he retired from the police force, he does readings and he's been on TV and he helps law enforcement. But he got contacted by a family in California one time, and their son had been missing for 8 months. And they said the police basically ran out of leads, and they said, try contacting a medium and, see if you can get anything. So they found him on the internet.
Brilliant.
They contacted him. So he started to, do his thing. And he saw this truck, and he's like, I see cheeseburger wrappers on the floor. I see empty vodka bottles. It's like a pigsty. He's like, I would not drive in this truck if you paid me. And the father said, that's my son's truck. He's like, you just nailed it to a T. That's exactly what it looks like. It was like a green Chevrolet pickup truck.
Wow.
And he said, if you have a map, take out a map. So he took out a map, and he said the sad thing is because he was getting this information from the other side, he knew that their son had passed on.
That's the difficult aspect. Yeah.
Because it was their son that was giving them this information. So he said that his sister's really good at reading maps. Is that true? And they said, yeah, she's good at it. So they pull out the map, and he says, I want you to go 020 degrees north. And they said, okay, that kind of puts us in like this park area. And he said it's I think it was roughly 139 miles from the house. And they said, okay, that's kind of like in the middle of nowhere or whatever. And he said that basically you'll find the truck, and you will also find his body near the truck in this area. And they said, okay, well, we have no way to prove that. Like, we know that, our daughter's good at reading maps, and we know that his truck is a green Chevrolet and that he does keep it messy. We were able to confirm all that. But, as far as what you're telling us with this last part, we can't confirm it. So, they said, well, what we'll do is we'll contact the police and we'll get them to search the area. So they ended up searching the area with drones and helicopters, and they spotted the truck. They had to get to the area by ATV. And when they got there, they actually did find his body next to the truck. And so what had happened is that I guess he was engaged to be married. And his fiance had cheated on him with his best friend, and he couldn't deal with it. And he went up to the mountains and killed himself. So the police detective called Chuck in Florida, and said, "When was the last time you were in California?" And almost like as a joke, but almost accusing him because the info was so specific that they thought that, if this guy was murdered, then only the killer would know this. And he said, "Listen, man," he said, "I've never been west of Texas. I've never been to California. I've actually, I was a law enforcement
Lucky
officer
for him
for 32 years with Salem, and this is what I do." And he kind of explained all that, and they just said, "Well, we had to ask you because the information was so specific that they were just blown away."
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So there's lots of cases like that. And I think it's fascinating when law enforcement does think outside the box on stuff like that.
What about yourself? Have you had have you got any kind of hidden skills in that region?
No, I always say I'm like the least psychic person available. I just, for whatever reason, and I actually took Lloyd's 4-week Developing Your Intuition course, which was really interesting. They actually do a fun exercise on remote viewing. But for whatever reason, I just don't have that ability. I don't know if I just don't have that quiet mind or what the case is. But I did actually have a premonition once, though. A premonition that something bad was going to happen. So I was off work sick with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I had dated this female that was worked with the Halifax Regional Police, and we had broken up. And all of a sudden, it's like months later. Wasn't thinking about her. I was at home, and all of a sudden I woke up, and it's like this image of her popped up into my mind. And I said, "Okay."
Wow.
I was like, "That's weird. Like, why am I thinking about her right now?" And then this like overwhelming feeling of dread came over me, and I was like, "That's really strange." And then I heard a voice say, "She made a complaint against you." And
wow.
So I was like, okay, so I just saw her. I have a really bad feeling of dread. Like, this is a premonition, right? And then 20 minutes later, my cell phone rings, and it's the Serious Incident Response Team. And they are an independent civilian agency that investigates the police for any wrongdoing. So they had called me, and they said, "Listen, don't want you to freak out." But, of course, I was freaking out because CERT doesn't call you to tell you you're doing a good job. They're calling you because you're in trouble. So I am freaking out, but they said that somebody had made a complaint against me, but they had investigated it before notifying me, and they determined that it was unfounded, and they kind of pieced it together, that it was basically a malicious complaint, and they just wanted to pop out to the house and tell me who made the complaint against me and what it was about and all that stuff. So sure enough, they did. They showed up at my house and told me, but it was funny because before they told me who had made the complaint, I already knew because I had that premonition. Yeah,
because you knew. That's interesting you picked that up.
Yeah, and it's the only time I've had like a psychic event happen to me. And I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was talking to somebody recently, and they said, certainly I classify it as a premonition. It meets the definition of premonition from a parapsychological standpoint. But somebody also suggested maybe it was somebody from beyond the grave just kind of giving me a warning.
It's quite possible. Absolutely. I think there's a very fine line between both of them. Realities, I think, yes, you can. Well, I know you can be communicated with the other side and they can warn you off. But it's almost the energy of it is different in respect to learn to discern between what is coming from a precognitive perception rather than a communication from the spirit, because normally if it's direct communication from the spirit and you pick it up, there's a different pattern to it, and it's almost like you could even communicate yourself. I mean, it's just like it's there. So it's a very, very fine line between both of that respect. But I think most people don't even listen to them. I was amazed. I wrote my first book I wrote was called Powers of the Sixth Sense, and I wrote it after 9/11. Because that's one of the things that I had focused in on, is that how many people had these precognitive experiences before, the disasters, and we're coming up to that terrible time in September, and, something that we remember, we'll never forget in our hearts and stuff. But it did amaze me how many people did have these experiences. And then, of course, one of the other, being an ex-military man myself, I'm fascinated by soldiers that have precognitive experiences or intuitive experiences during battle or during insurgencies or things like that. And I've spoken to, and that's maybe some other project I can do in the future, but I've spoken to loads of soldiers that are like, Jock, I was behind this wall in the Middle East or in Northern Ireland. One of my friends in Northern Ireland, he says, and I had this image. I just had, it was horrible. And then all of a sudden, one of our guys get taken out by one of the IRA snipers. And it fascinates me because it's like, okay, so where's the application where we can take this element of sci into, I know we had the Stargate program and everything else. Yeah, I understand that. But where's the practical application that we could actually save lives rather than the spying side of things? We could utilize it to save lives. It fascinates me. Anyway, listen, you and I, we could speak all day about all sorts of things. And I get that you want to get back to your beautiful daughter, who you call your little demon, and was
a little demon at times. Yes,
I was the squares. That comes free, by the way. That's with every episode. Just to give you the feeling that we're talking about haunted things. You'll come back on Deadly Departed and speak to us more about your work and stuff like that. I'm really excited to have you up on Parawize. Tell everybody about your books again and where they can get you. And we never. Do you know what? We never spoke. We need to do it in another show, but we never spoke about your ghost project. So we're definitely going to have another show where we'll talk about your ghost project. I really want to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, so the easiest way to get in touch with us and find everything is our website, PPRI.net, stands for Paranormal Phenomena Research Investigation.net. You can find links to the books and stuff like that on there, but Amazon is probably the cheapest and the fastest way to get the books. Yeah. But other than that, you can go on the Barnes & Noble website, or you can go to, if you're in Canada, you can go to Indigo Chapters Cole's website. The books are physically in store in the Halifax Regional Municipality area for any local listeners. PPRI.net has contact information. It has links to my social media under my profile. It's got information about our organization. It's got a link to Ghost Project Canada, which we can talk about next episode. That's probably the best way.
Absolutely. And we're certainly, hopefully, you're going to get more involved with us in the magazine. Well, both our magazines, the new one coming out called Parawize and the one that we have, Paranormal Daily News. Hopefully, we'll get you featured in there. And certainly get your links and everything in there, and to get your books and other where the people can reach out to you. Elliot, this has been awesome, dude. I really thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you. I'm really glad that we hooked up, met up, and I definitely want to have you come back so other people can learn from you. What's a final lesson that you want to leave the viewers and the listeners with from you, from PPRI, from Dr. Van Dusen? Fire away.
Well, the most important thing that I always encourage people to do is to take the formal education that's available, and I always push the Rhine Education Center because it is probably one of the most reputable spots to take parapsychology courses in. The other place, as we mentioned earlier, is the Kessler Parapsychology Unit from University of Edinburgh. They do an introduction to parapsychology course.
Let me interject there, by the way, as a Scotsman from Scotland. It's Edinburgh.
I know. I always. That's a Canadian way to say it. I actually have Carolyn Watt's book right here, but. I always call it Edinburgh.
I love it. I'm glad that you said that. Right, so carry on. Absolutely. Sorry about that. I had to do it.
The other reputable spot that I would recommend as well is the School of Parapsychology, which is run by Dr. Karen O'Keefe, who's a parapsychologist in the UK as well. He does a few courses. He does a few intro to parapsychology, intermediate parapsychology. He did a really cool course that I took called Exorcism and Possession. And he teaches a poltergeist course as well, which I would be interested in taking as well. I think it's just a 4-week short course. But like I said, any sort of courses or anything like that people can take, because that's one of PPRI's objectives, is the educational aspect of things. That's why we do podcasts.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to you and your colleague bringing that out, and promote the shit out of it on Paranormal Daily News for you guys. Absolutely. I'm all about the education and all about the science. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Deadly Departed. This has been my guest, Dr. Elliot Van Dusen, who's now learned how to say Edinburgh. We will be having him back on. If you enjoyed this and you want to ask Elliot any questions before he comes on the next time, just drop us a line. You know all the social media channels. Ask your questions. Contact us at PDN, and we will put it to him for the next episode. Elliot, it's been awesome, my friend. I'm really glad, and I love your daughter. And for those of you that are watching this online, she will be making an appearance. And
yes, she made a couple of appearances.
That is all part of the episode. That's all part of the fun in the episode. Dude, awesome. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to coming back, and we can discuss a whole lot more.
All sorts. All right. God bless.